Bonjour. AI for Good, l'intelligence artificielle au service du bio.
Good afternoon. So we're going to turn to the next round table. IA for good. Should we be afraid or not? What type of impact on our beliefs, on our way of doing things? 350 experts, if I'm right, signed a document the day before yesterday by the founder of GPT and by Elon Musk. This is maybe a buzz, but it's also topical, I'm sure. And may I recall that you can ask questions via the QR code, and we will be answering them at the end of your presentations. So we have got a panel representing all the stages in the rocket. Mr. Bonnefond, researcher at TSE, or also psychologist. You are trained in psychology. I must say it's highly interesting in this area. And you worked on the reactions of populations and people vis-a-vis autonomous cars. You are working with McKinsey, aren't you? And you discuss IA issues in businesses, especially when it comes to job organization and running, business running, daily business running. And you are also working on the next stages of IA. And Joseph Barral, you are in charge of DeepMind Google, which is a very important branch of Google. And you work quite a lot with a sister company of Google in the health sector. And you have several patents in medical imaging and robotics. I'm going to ask you the first question. And of course, a gentleman from McKinsey is Mr. Hazel. And I wanted to say, what is the type of IA we are discussing today? Should we be scared, frightened, or not? We may not need you next year. Who knows? Well, thanks very much for this good question. Well, what about IA? It's a tool, like many other technological tools, actually. It's a powerful tool, of course. We are at kind of turning point, same as with mobile phones and the internet 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it would have been extremely difficult to know about its impact worldwide, its field and scope of application. For such powerful technology, I find it wise to start with an accountable, responsible approach. And we started in 2018 working on this, wanting IA to hit the largest number of people, to avoid biases, to enforce security at private and professional level. And beyond these basic principles, we work so much so that applications and the targeted populations of people will use and should use these tools. In fact, thus encouraging accountable behavior vis-a-vis and accountable application vis-a-vis these powerful tools. You said that fundamental research was working hand in hand with applicative research, applied research. And we have got, of course, fundamental IA research labs with us, and we work together with our product targeted teams in bilateral manner, bilateral way. That is to say, with constant exchanges between a fundamental and applied research. You mentioned curiosity and how beneficial it could be among researchers. How far can they invent, design, and put their creativity to use? Well, no limit, actually, no limitation, but when conducting research, you have to feel free from an intellectual viewpoint and being able to work. I was discussing this over lunch, being able to recognize bird songs and to discuss and to deal with other issues, medical issues, deforestation and others. I think it's great. I think it's highly valuable. Now, when applying all these techniques, we introduced regulation at a very early stage, and many other players and stakeholders have to go and along the same lines and take regulation into account to have these applications available to the largest number. Mr. Cazin, I was quite reassured, I must say, as far as I'm concerned. You were not talking about the disappearance of mankind as a whole. Yes, indeed. So I think that the way things are envisaged in the manifesto, the document you have just mentioned, is highly interesting. The people writing this document manifesto say that it's up to us to give meaning to what's being done by these high-tech products or facilities. If you take nuclear power, there are negative externalities attached to it. So I think that we must ask ourselves the following question: how to use these technologies over time, so to speak. As we say in Belgium, let's put the church amidst the village, as we say in Belgium, and we must actually produce, make use of the content. And I'm just taking an example. Some people had kind of collated the whole all the worldwide music, including Mozart and others, thanks to an algorithm. Just gave a few rings or a few bits and pieces, and then the algorithm could calculate the whole piece of music. But they had a starting point to do so. I'm talking about the algorithms, of course. Now, we want this tech to exist, to be available and for the common good. What does that mean, actually? What does common good mean? IA has such a wide scope of applications that it's sometimes quite easy to see. It's for the common good. An autonomous car, for instance, we want it to avoid collisions, for instance. We do understand in this case what common good means, but it may be more intricate in some other cases. Once you have reduced the number of collisions you may have with an autonomous car, you have to think about the people who have to be protected first and foremost. You then enter a different world in which it's not so easy to agree with one another. And there are other scopes, there are other fields of application in which it's impossible to know of the impact and of the fallout. Let's take teachers, lecturers, lawyers, etc. And let's take on the other side some people who tend to have the ad hoc qualities or skills to make decisions to the benefit of common goods and to the benefit of common good. Sometimes we do trust, especially as I've just mentioned, the experts, the teachers, lecturers, lawyers, etc. That's one specific situation. But this is okay when you have got people. But if you have a machine on the one hand, you enter a different world, and it's more difficult to trust a machine, of course. And then it becomes necessary to explain the machine how to make its own choice or their own choices if we've got several machines. And there is a real gap in this matter because it's very difficult then to agree on the notion of common good to be taken on board. Well, let's take the simplest case. What we call good is a least evil, let's say, and to name it this way. And I was mentioning road and car collisions. You know what is not good and what is evil, having casualties on the road, and less evil means having less casualties on the road. That's the difference between the two. I don't say it's easy from a technical viewpoint, not easy to solve this technical issue, but it's not that too complex to agree on the final target in terms of road collisions and casualties. Now, when you are a researcher, you don't want to close any door, do you? Well, may I go back to your example? There is another field in which a concept can apply. That's the health sector. When looking at the scope of applications in the health sector, may I recall MedPalm 2, which comes after MedPalm 1, and which is a huge language model we have retrained, applied to a medical corpus in order to answer some specific clinical cases. It's been done very cautiously by a team working years and years on it, and we have trained medical doctors to be able to assess the answers, to know whether the doctor had a preference for the answer given by a peer, by a medical doctor, or by the system, and to also better understand what are the best possible ways to do well and to do badly, so to speak. And of course, in English, we have got the expression of first do not harm. That's the oath taken by future doctors, medical doctors or medical experts. And first, don't do any harm, do not harm. This is valid for doctors, but this has to be valid. For the system. So, in our case, would the answer be, let's say, not very good because it doesn't take into account part of the population, etc., etc. So you have to be very cautious to work step by step, and you have to be able to assess all the answers step by step, and you have to be quite modest, humble in assessing the model in order to better grasp its own limitations and to be able to apply it to hospitals, patients, the clinical world, etc. And may I say that it's not a black or white situation or an all or nothing situation. We have to understand how to deploy things. And you have also to educate the people you are working with. First, no harm. Is it an easy principle to apply? Excellent question, crucial question. We have designed a concept entitled corporate social responsibility and intellectual social responsibility. That is the potentially negative and the positive impacts. And we have conducted economic analysis, and when working at micro and macro levels, we realize that when technology does penetrate both worlds quite intensely, we have more impact and more sustainable impact too. But the real hitch in all this, and in that we can do a lot in a research lab. We're able to automate tasks. It's highly impressive what we can achieve thanks to, especially among and with knowledge workers, lawyers, medical doctors, etc. But there is some lag time between the time we do develop and design a concept and the time it's being incorporated and accepted by the knowledge workers. And it takes time to train the people, that is to say, wage earners, salaried people, or any other category of workers, actually. Well, I must say that since COVID, even before COVID, actually, there has been a need to change skills and competencies and to make the difference between the skills we have and the skills and competencies we should have. The aim being to retrain people if needed in some jobs. Half of the tasks will have to be fully automated. So what are we doing in this case? Are we retraining the workers? Are we having a kind of machine co-pilot working hand in hand with the worker, the human worker? Let me mention the digital workshops organized since 2011, 2012 in France, which targeted over 100,000 people, and about 50% of them in this region, large region, so that the population part of companies, with the workers in the various companies could adapt, could adjust to these new techniques. There are also current initiatives because these technologies are going to embark a lot of sectors so that everybody can make these technologies their own, so to speak. And as already mentioned, the way each activity is going to encapsulate these new technologies makes it crucial, mandatory to have very well delineated frameworks with very accurate rules. And the point also is to be able to experiment so that we can really grasp whether a technology can really answer the needs. What about the user side? Going back to the autonomous car, for instance. Well, what about people's expectations? Well, the autonomous car example may be an extreme. When talking about a fully automated car, we have 100% IA, excluding human intervention, and the time scale doesn't allow for the human being to be part of the loop. It's far too quick. In this particular case, it's an extreme you are mentioning, actually. And there are no other such cases these days in which we could leave IA, we could let IA be the only captain on the boat or pilot on the plane. And a case in which man would be fully replaced with IA. We are, in fact, in a rather transitory period in which people have to learn how to work with this new colleague, this new colleague being IA, and this new colleague is really very special and may raise some problems and may entail challenges and create situations in which a human colleague has to try and find valuable solutions and adjust. to the new situation. Would you say that this co-construction could adjust to IA control and regulation? How do you tackle this issue? You mentioned a step-by-step political stance or measures. Yes, indeed. We do have to conduct experiments or to experience things. And in terms of regulation, we said from the very start that IA had to be properly regulated. And we need this regulation to be more relevant and cogent. And we must try and find a framework which allows for experimentation, for experiments. And let's not forget that despite or for all our in-house tests, the outside players have their own ways and many ways for testing a solution. And so in-house testing is valuable, is good, but external testing is also extremely valuable. Are you thinking in terms of supranational or state regulations? Well, all and above, actually, I would say. We have to talk to and to exchange views with the various governmental authorities, at European and American level, in order to define a framework to avoid incompatibility and to be able to find something which makes it possible for common good to express itself. I'm not going to talk of regulations, but I'm going to mention negative externalities which are intrinsic to our work. AI models have got their own bias, and there are also startups who try and work on de-biasing IA answers. And as mentioned by Joël, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, actually, and hence your concept of co-construction. That is. Well, I find it difficult to express what I mean, but I'm not sure I would like to. I'm going to use the word construction, but I think it's. The more you experiment, the better you will identify your scope and the boundaries, actually, of this scope, which you want to be yours. May I just go back to the gradual or step-by-step policy or viewpoint? I would like to expose people to a new technology in controlled conditions so that they can well imagine what's going to happen. This was great until last December. We had we could do this, but last December we had some unexpected event. O'Connor made available to the whole globe ChatGPT. It made it available to the whole world. And what happened then? We were outside the scope, fully outside the scope of research laboratories. I'm not deploring these as a psychologist, a behavioral specialist, and expert. It's fantastic. It's huge. It's as if my experiences experiments could be carried out at world level. But we have changed scope, we have changed dimension, and a whole wave has been unfurling throughout the world.
Commencer à écrire de manière active.
So we have started working on this actively,
since 2016, looking at the potential of these technologies, most of the models have been identified in the 50s, and the computational capabilities in terms of algorithms and the digital data changed the scene. But then there's been an acceleration, I think, and over the last years. Regarding the generative artificial intelligence, we'll talk about it a bit later, and this acceleration meant that many scientists or researchers were involved in this with huge means, and this has changed the scene in terms of humanity and employments. Could we come back on the last years of the 50s? Yes, the three ingredients which enabled to have this change: the computational power, and also the transformer, which is a technology or an architecture, which came in 2017, which was a precursor, the key, leading us to the models that we have today, which have the efficiency that we know today. Yes, what sort of impact on the work organizations in companies, Eric? Well, that's a topic we are very much concerned about for the last years, actually. And what we have found is that we have identified, we made analyses on about 800 key employments in a developed economy, where you have the task 25 types of skills, and we found that there's about 10% of the employments which would be automated, 95%. At the horizon 2030. So it's a lot, and it's not so much given the pace of constructing or destroying jobs. But 70% of the employment should be automated by 40 or 50%. Now, if you look at these figures, now these are things that are very important. Again, to 2030, 40, 50, there are various models and various scenarios. Now, leaving this aside, the transition is very important, that we have to wonder within the companies in the various economic sectors and within the country, what do we do to do some training so that people could adapt? Because in order to retain your employment, you should be trained to the technology. I give you a very small example. First one, all the analyses that were done a few years ago. I used to say that the paralegal associations were about to disappear. Now, these are firms working with the lawyers, and we looked at what happened in the States, and we found that the paralegal jobs were on the increase. And then we found as well that the legal assistants who were mastering the new artificial intelligence research tools was very much increasing. And those who were not using them were on the decrease. So if you master the technology for the AI, because so the medium lawyer, instead of having 5 researchers, will ask for 2 research. If you are trained to the tool, the demand is increasing. So there's something about this. We want to factor this and factor it in. And so if you train people in the right place, and this is one of the questions in the audience here, and there you have a real potential, because people will retain their jobs, but also will have more added value to their job. But it's a change, and it's a disruption. Now, sequencing, generating artificial intelligence, Mr. Pagnol was one of the Stanford researchers who looked at the application of generative artificial intelligence for the customer centers. They used a co-pilot generative algorithm with people who were answering the phone by codifying all the best practices of the best call centers. So the best call center members didn't need the co-pilot, they are very efficient, and all the others are reaching the best level. So this is just to show you that all this moves towards more added value. So it's a very important disruption. Joël and Jean-François, and then we'll look at the question in the audience, because without any surprise, AI is a very, very interesting as a topic, and we are, 5 or 10 years ago, the initial reaction of radiologists by looking at algorithms was fear, because they thought they would be replaced. But now I have this had this conversation not so long ago. Many see it as an aid, something which will help them to go quicker in their diagnosis because they have 20,000 images to look at, because with all the scan images, they have to be analyzed and more advanced, and many more instruments are used. So as a result, there you have to train a practitioner per type of imagery or scientific instrument. And I think there we could see this as a supplement which is going to help a number of jobs, either to be more efficient or to understand better the data that are much more important than it used to be. And I think this is a very pertinent approach to help people use these technologies and develop them as well, so that they would be fully integrated into the way they work and to make them as pertinent as possibly can be done. Well, there are many things I'd like to say, actually, but I will select two things. First of all, concerning the work organization and the call center example. If you look at the literature, what people think and how much they accept to be managed by artificial intelligence in their companies, we can observe that if you ask the question to people who are working in companies where the management with IA is not, so they will not accept it, and they found it and it's very bad, they will not like it. For many different reasons. Are they afraid? Yes, they are afraid because they are very negative on the whole. Now, if you ask people who have been working within companies where the management has integrated artificial intelligence, they are more positive. There is an optimistic vision where people are negative, other than where people would be negative at the start, but that's not like that, because the companies where the management using artificial intelligence exists, in France, these are companies that have decided to use that type of management, and because they have some specific features, so that AI management is a good example, a good idea for these companies. So there, you shouldn't be too optimistic and think that the data shows us that it's very difficult for people and they don't like it. No, we haven't got the data for that. And then for call centers, helping and coaching and getting the best practices is a good idea. But there are many other things as well in call centers that are more controversial. A very controversial example would be the use of artificial intelligence to delete in real time the accent, foreign accent of the employee in the call center, because somebody is talking with their own accent, and the user who's calling the call center will hear somebody whose accent has been deleted. So that increases the satisfaction of the customer and that of the employees as well. But that's a societal dilemma, because we used to say that you have to comply, you have to respect each other, you have to be inclusive, you have to like diversity, and you can speak with the accent you want. And there you have in situations that whatever your accent will have a rapid solution. If you have a foreign accent, they keep their accent and everybody's happy, it will be deleted. Everybody will be happy in the short term, but that's a social tension in terms of your social goal in the long term. Do we want a society where we are using filters in order to talk just like anyone else, or do you accept the many ways in which people speak? Yes, I'd like to say that in this example, with the Stanford, California, Nation for Diversity, and yes, so we'll move to the questions from the audience. I'd like to thank the first caller. Now, many jobs are threatened by the progress of artificial intelligence. Would it be a break to common good or not? Who wants to respond to that? Well, we have partly responded to that, but then to respond in the other way, because from the research point of view, I can see there are many things to do, either to better understand how we're going to use this as a copilot, and also for fundamental issues, where we're looking at how AI is going to help in science and medicine. And I think there's plenty of work to be done in the coming years in order to really master this particular tool. and so that the technologies would be used to the benefit of everybody. I'd like to respond to various levels. First of all, the technology and the penetration, including IA, it is not destroying but creating employment. But there's a mismatch between the created jobs and today's jobs and today's skills. And this is the discrepancy here, which is important. When we worked with economists on various macro scenarios that I was referring to a minute ago, we're trying to say that if we are using technology to make productivity for saving purposes, then we are using it to do growth, to produce inclusive and responsible growth. Now, in the economic scenarios, as I was saying, where you use the technology in order to develop people and to create employments that would use technology as a complement. And then there we have more economic growth. And if we use other indicators like the welfare indicators that some economists are using, then we look at the lifetime in good health and that sort of thing. So the indicators, sustainability and indicators, economic indicators, we have to use it responsibly, this artificial intelligence. And in order to add something else, which has been invoked this morning as well, it is essential to have more young people interested in these technological career. You have to do maths, and I think you shouldn't hesitate to say that, and incentivize the young to go towards the scientific careers, because we'll need them for all the challenges that we have to face, and also to continue developing IA. This was mentioned at the very start of the session, and also it was looking at motivation. Now, how do you motivate everybody when we talk about generative artificial intelligence? This scientific anchorage enables us to face huge challenges and making sure that we have the skills in order to master these tools. One other question: how can we handle AI in schools? What sort of transition should we have, particularly in France, where we try to promote maths and attract people towards scientific jobs? I'd like to answer. There are two aspects here. First, what goes on if your students are using AI for their courses and for the work they have to do, and this has to be framed. And I've heard a number of examples where people were using technologies in a proactive way in their exams in order to solve their problems. But then I think that I'm not a teacher, so I cannot answer in this regard. But concerning should we teach so that the students have a good understanding of this technology? I think we are in a country which historically has been very good at maths, and I think we are quite capable of taking up this challenge. And from a diversity point of view, I just would like to say that we realize that many young ladies like maths or computerization because there are sometimes we don't want to follow a first course in these subjects because people are going there are not like us. So I think we have to take the right measures so that diversity should include this dimension as well. Eric, three things here. First of all, of course, with the generative AI, we are sure that the way we teach is going to change, because we can see that in the intelligence workers. If you are a lawyer is writing a contract, is going to use an assistant who's going to suggest a number of clauses. We will not be able to teach in the same manner. However, teaching means that you have to reflect. And in other words, it's critical spirit. It means that you have to reflect in a field where intelligence is becoming a commodity. That'll be the question. It's a very interesting question. You have to remain curious and you have to be critical in a world where it's going very easy to produce fake news. Second point, training. Because we have a human capital which is quite impressive in terms of technologies in France and Europe, but it's not enough. Because it's developing all over the place. We have good researchers. If you look at all the scientific publications that are produced on AI, the number of French or Europeans who are signing these articles, it shows that that is good for us. And just on this side, we haven't got the right level of investments concerning AI in Europe relative to the problem, even in education and concerning the production of competencies, because we have a very good competence. And the mismatch between supply and demand, between the companies, what they want, and what the education system is producing, we have a mismatch. And we haven't got the right people in these jobs that are generated with a two. You should have, in the industry, in the manufacturing side, the people haven't got the right skills. There's a chamber there which is needed for training for 3 to 6 months, so that the people leaving the system and the educational system should be trained. So these are the various ways to answer. Yes, again, Choral Barral, and as you were saying, we need to have these students going into these careers. We have to push to get a generation which will contribute to AI. But as a psychologist, I'd like to say that we also need to train generations which will not necessarily develop AI, but which will have to live with it, because it's very important in the life of citizens, not only to be able to use these technologies, even if we do not create it, and also to understand the major societal choices that are associated with AI. And I try with my students to have a non-technical angle or approach, and I try with them to simulate the various societal changes that can be made using various technologies. And we look at the consequences in the long term for the society, in terms of road accidents or legal errors, and trying to show what sort of the challenges, what sort of societal changes that can, or societal choices, because we want this student to be a generation which is better informed. Now we move to the last question.
d'Hippocrate pour les chercheurs.
Do you know whether researchers specialized in artificial intelligence have to take an oath too? This question has already been asked to me. Have we got have these researchers, IA researchers, do they have a code of conduct? Should they take an oath? And since, of course, we have high flying criteria, shouldn't it be highly positive to have such an oath to be taken by dedicated AI researchers? Last question. We just have 1 minute left. When exchanging views, you say that users had even more imagination than we as users. Than we as researchers, sorry. Answer. Well, I'm convinced that artificial intelligence is and has to remain a tool. The one who has the final say is the user or the student, and or the pupil, depending on the environment. And but as already mentioned, applied to education, we must think globally on how to use artificial intelligence. And And the people tackling these issues must have a clear notion of what common good means. Eric, Jean-François, 10 seconds each. Well, let's not deny the world of uncertainty we are in. And quite frankly, we don't really know what type of society will emerge. We don't really know about the entry point we are at. But we must be able to trust ourselves and to trust society. I'm slightly concerned, actually, not when it comes to AI use. It should be the underscore, but I'm rather concerned when it comes to economic competitiveness. And as Europe did in the last 10 years, US capitalization is much higher. This is due to the level of penetration of technology among European firms and within European firms. We do need boundaries in order to allow for sustainable use and application of AI and at European level. Thanks very much to all of you. Well, it's a fantastic topic we're dealing with today. I hope it will be on the agenda of the next summit, 2024 summit. Thank you.